Well, hello everybody, and welcome to tonight's edition of The Great Movies, a discussion of Stop Making Sense from 1984. My name is Andy Wolverton, and I'm delighted to be joined once again by my partner in crime, Darnice Jasper, who...
Oh, here
here's
I am.
the cue, on cue, even on cue. Darnice and I are both librarians in the Anne Arundel County, Maryland Public Library System, which, along with the Library Foundation, sponsors this program. And let me throw a little bit of information your way about the Library Foundation. Some really, really great people there that graciously fund this program. And so we're very, very thankful and fortunate to have them. Okay, so our next virtual meeting will be on Friday, April the 7th at 7 p.m. Eastern, when we will discuss Hit the Road from 2021. Now, this is a replacement movie for our original film, which was going to be Burning, which was removed from Canopy just a few weeks ago. That's okay, because Hit the Road is a wonderful little film that really hasn't gotten the attention it deserves. I'm not going to tell you anything about it right now, but I think you will enjoy that. Again, that's Hit the Road from 2021, and signups for that discussion begin on March the 24th. And let me throw that at you as well. I think we got everybody here that's a regular, maybe one or two new folks. So if you are new to our discussions, glad to have you along. And if you'd like to join our email list, please send me an email at awolverton@aacpl.net. That way you'll get all the news about all of our upcoming programs before anybody else. Okay, all right. So why I chose this movie. I always have a couple of movies that I hope, if they ever show up on Canopy, that I want to do. And actually, there were three that I had from the very, very beginning that I said, if these ever show up, we're going to do it. One, we already have done, The Best Years of Our Lives. I said, as soon as that pops up, we're going to do it. We did it. Another one that has not popped up that I would drop everything to do is Touch of Evil, Orson Welles. Love that movie, and I think we would have a great discussion about that. And this one, Stop Making Sense. I'll tell you why.
Technically didn't.
Yeah, technically, right. It did take a dive off of Canopy, which sorry about that, but I hope that you were able to access it before it left Canopy, or you were finding some other place to do that. So, all right, so here's one of the reasons why I chose this, not only because I really love this movie, although I'm not the biggest Talking Heads fan in the world. I do like them, but there's something about this movie that speaks to me. One of the things is, a few years ago, I ran across an interesting article about tonight's film. The article's premise is that the entire movie, Stop Making Sense, is not only a concert movie, it's also a creation story. Now, bear with me here. As the film opens, we've got one guy on stage singing and playing all alone, with some help from a cassette player and a Roland TR-808 drum machine for Psycho Killer. A song about many things, one of which is an aversion to being around other people. It could also be interpreted as a song about having multiple personality disorder, or generally just not knowing who you are. At the very least, it's a song about a very confused person. Next, we add another person, bass player Tina Weymouth, a woman, for a song called Heaven. After that, we add drummer Chris France for Thank You for Sending Me an Angel, which could be thought of as a sort of Adam meets Eve type of song. And we add guitarist, keyboardist Jerry Harrison for Found a Job, a song primarily about the struggles of family and relationships. Then Slippery People, about oppression, but also about faith and religion. Burning Down the House alludes to liberation and breaking free. Now, we can go on with this analogy, and it doesn't even have to be a biblical creation story, but the further you go into the concert, the more the creation analogy starts, well, making sense. Pun intended. Now, on the DVD commentary, director Jonathan Demme states more than once that he sees the musicians as characters and that each song reveals something about their personalities. There's no real narrative, Demme says, but we're seeing characters with some kind of narrative unfolding. He also mentions that David Byrne's character opens the movie as a stiff white guy who evolves and loosens up as the film goes on, giving Demme something that Demme calls an implied narrative. But even without the concept of a creation story, if you don't buy that at all, that's fine. Stop Making Sense has a tremendous level of energy and a joyous feel, regardless of what the songs are about. David Byrne seems to be working at an almost frantic pace for the entire movie, which was filmed over a period of 3 nights at Hollywood's Pantages Theater. Stop Making Sense also broke several conventions for concert movies. We don't have any flashy 15-minute guitar or drum solos, no colored lights were used, and the stage and its surroundings were painted black so that the focus is on the performers. There are no interviews and very few audience shots. You have a sense of being in the concert, but closer to the stage than you could ever be in a real concert. In fact, during initial screenings, audiences would applaud between songs and get up to dance as if they were seeing a live concert. The film keeps your eyes engaged, and no 2 songs are the same. Now, almost 40 years old, Stop Making Sense may be the best concert movie ever made. To me, it is, and maybe to you. So let's hear what your thoughts are about Stop Making Sense. All right, Darnice, who's first?
We got Bill first.
Okay.
Well, I never was a Talking Heads fan. I didn't hate them, but I just never was that big of a fan of them. And to me, this was just simply yes, it was filmed over 3 nights, but it was the same concert put on all 3 nights, and they just recorded it. Yes, they did interesting camera angles, some, close-ups mixed with long shots and stuff. So it was all, that was interesting, but it was their stage show. So the whole thing you were just describing, that's the way they put on their show. It wasn't really because of the movie. It was because that's the way they must have done their concert. So I'd argue that I'm not sure why we're really talking about this as a movie night discussion, because it just was a concert film. And the only interesting thing I learned about the whole thing is I looked up and found out that David Byrne actually was raised in Arbutus, Maryland, and graduated from Lansdowne High School. That was all interesting, but I'm not won over as that this is the best concert film ever, and that this was really a movie we needed to talk about.
Okay, well, some honesty right off the bat from Bill that says this is just a concert movie and maybe not the best one. Okay, all right, thanks, Bill.
Okay, so we got Susan, then John, then Bob.
Hi, everybody. I thought that Maryland, that came to mind. That's why Andy picked this, because he was from David Byrne's from Maryland, but no, I don't think so. Anyway, I am one of the few people, I miss the 80s. I don't know what happened to me in pop music in the 80s, but I have never seen David Byrne. I've never seen his group. I don't know any of those songs. So I watched the movie twice, and I thought it was more than a concert film. I think you have to sort of listen and watch it a couple of times to really pick up on the energy and how it gradually gets more and more energetic, and to the point where that he's like jogging around the stage, which I don't know how he could do that and do a concert without being exhausted. And he had all those like raising up his neck like a turtle and Google eyes and all kinds of like weird facial expressions. I really loved the first song, Psycho Killer. I don't know. I just that it just caught me. A very catchy song, and I like the fact that there's some French in there. Qu'est-ce que c'est, Psycho Killer. And the other one I really liked, the number that I really liked, was the great Al Green from Memphis, Take Me to the River. that was a terrific performance. And I also want to point out the resemblance, even though this concert film was years ago, that his outfit, David Byrne's outfit later in the concert, where he's wearing these great big pants, all padded up and like a red hat, it reminded me of somebody, I won't mention who, but some recent famous person. So I love the music. I'd listen to it again. I think I probably will try to watch it one more time. And I thought it was, even though it was a music video, it's not really, there's a lot more to it, I thought. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Susan. I want to touch on something that you mentioned that I hadn't really thought of until you mentioned it, that this, this 1984, this was pretty much at the height of the music video craze. I mean, MTV started, I think, in 1980, 81. I had just started college. And so you could look at each of these songs and have that as a music video. And the Talking Heads actually did music videos. I remember very clearly the Burning Down the House video. So, I don't know if that was something Jonathan Demme was trying to capture in this film, the video craze, but yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you.
Awesome.
Okay.
So we got John, then Bob, then David.
Okay.
You're muted, John.
John, where are you?
I have a lot of things to say about it, but I won't say everything I would like to say. But I just want to pick on something that Bill brought up, because I found it really interesting that David Byrne, who, when you read his official biography, he's a Scottish-born musician, but he grew up in Arbutus. And I found that absolutely fascinating. I lived right now. I mean, I lived there the same time he did, not in Arbutus, but that's where we went to the library, to the movie theater and everything else. I lived in that part of Baltimore that was skirted Arbutus. And it brought up for me, one of the things that I was really trying to figure out is, why did David Byrne leave Baltimore? Because back then, I don't know if anybody else lived in Baltimore back in that era, but there was a very lively music scene in Baltimore then. In almost every genre, there was a very active Black music scene. There was a theater. There was one in Washington, D.C. with the same name. I forget the name of it now, but James Brown used to come, but there are also local bands that played. There was a really strong folk music scene back then also, with some really talented people performing. And then there was the rock scene. In fact, one group, I think they were the ones that first performed Pretty Flamingo before Manfred Mann took it over. I'm going way back, I know. But the reason I'm bringing all that up was that David Byrne was growing up at that time, and yet he chose to leave and go to New York. Well, actually, he went to RISD first. That's where he met Chris France and France's wife, Tina Weymouth. They were there briefly. But they became very, very closely identified with the New York scene. And anyway, I could go on and on about that, but I won't. The other thing, though, I think I want to challenge Bill a little bit on this, is that I don't think it's really just a concert film, because I think what Talking Heads did, and it was part of the whole New York there was this downtown scene in New York back then, in Soho, East Village, and so forth. They conjoined music and art, and one of the things that they stress, and you see this in the movie, the aesthetic is different. It's not lavish or anything, but it is a deliberate aesthetic that they were trying to present themselves not only as a musical group, but visually as a kind of artistic, performance art type thing. And I think they pulled that off really well. So, and the other thing I would just say, I moved up to New York at that time. I lived there. They were very, very influential throughout the city at that time. Very influential, or at least the downtown part of the city, which was distinct from Midtown and the official art like Lincoln Center, Carnegie Hall, and so forth. They were very influential and remained influential until they decided to go their different ways. But I think they had a lot of influence, not only on the type of music, but the way it was presented, and also this conjunction of art and music together, I think were very important. And you see that in this film. And Demme clearly has bought into that aesthetic, the way he films it. He really has underscored it, exploited it beneficially. And so you get a much different experience as a viewer than you would, even if you saw his Heart of Gold video film with Neil Young that he did, I don't know, 10 years ago or something. It's a much different type of movie than this. This is something where Demme's fully bought into the aesthetic of the performers as well as his own individual aesthetic. Anyway, that's enough for now.
All right, John, thank you. You bring up some really interesting points. And yeah, about their background, I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, they met, I believe they met at the Rhode Island School of Design before they went to New York. The thing that's so interesting about the Talking Heads is I don't think the punk group or the punk world entirely embraced them, because the Talking Heads music is so hard to pin down. I remember buying more songs about buildings and food because it had Take Me to the River, which everyone was listening to when it came out. But there's nothing else on that album remotely like that. And I was fascinated by that. And their songs are they're just really difficult to pin down. And I do hope we will talk more about Jonathan Demme as we go along, because he is.
I would just say one other thing, Andy. I think they were kind of in David Bowie territory. They were kind of a cut above the punk scene, which was very gritty. They brought a lot of that minimalist aesthetic to their work, but I would say that they were probably in the same stratum as David Bowie, who was doing a lot of the same things. And of course, at the end of his life and his career, really took it to a really interesting level, I think.
I think that's a good comparison, John. Okay, Darnice, who's next?
We've got Bob, then David.
Okay.
And then
I want to take a moment of personal privilege here to say that I gave up listening to popular music on October 14th, 1972. I used to ride around on Saturday mornings and listen to Casey Kasem do the top 40 countdown. And that week, I hadn't heard 5 of the top 10 tunes. So I thought, this is going nowhere. I'm wasting my time. So I gave up. I literally didn't listen to popular music again. I didn't know who Freddie Mercury was until after he died. But I made one exception, and that was for this guy. When you say cut above David Bowie, I would say he was a cut above Bach. I have never heard music the way that David Byrne has been producing it for 40 years. And I don't say that lightly. Two of y'all have mentioned the 3 of them meeting at Rhode Island School of Design. That school is to design as Juilliard is to music. You don't get any better than that. And you take three kids who were smart enough to get in there, you have got the core of an atomic bomb. And that in itself is not a bad example, because I think that Byrne's contribution to modern music, he has done to that kind of art what Max Planck was doing to quantum physics 100 years ago. I am in awe of this guy, everything he's ever done. A movie that should be on our list at some point is True Lies. True Stories. John Goodman and Swoosie Kurtz. I think I've seen that movie 15 times. I'd watch it again tonight if it were easily available. So you couldn't have picked a movie that I was going to enjoy more. And I am so glad you did. That people need to be exposed to this man because he is one of American art's true geniuses. Thanks.
Bob, I couldn't
Bob?
agree with you more.
You
Darnice,
never
yeah.
cease, you never cease to amaze me. I am always taken aback about the different nuances that you bring to this thing, and I love it. Thank you so much. Okay, so we've got David, then Bill B.
Hi, I'm David.
David,
I'm assuming
David,
it's
welcome.
Bob.
And Abby, nice to see you.
Yeah, I'm her dad. I wanted to say I wish I had spoken before John and Bob because they made such cogent, intellectual, precise points. Now I'm going to sound like a doofus, but
No,
No,
no.
I'm a diehard Talking Heads fan. I said New Wave in the chat, and somebody, of course, being the intellectuals we are, had to argue with me. But I was in this era. You know, I'm about Andy's age, I guess, and 60 something, and I had this whole problem with finding my genre, finding my people. There was the disco sucks. There was I don't like country music. It's too slow. It's kind of like really crappy 70s rock, in my opinion. I'm sorry if I hurt anyone's feelings. There was the I lived in Manhattan around that time. Chased somebody who broke my heart. Of course, why else would you move to Manhattan as a young person? And then I also I was going to the clubs in DC, the 930 Club and the Wax Museum and things like that. And the slam dancing was a lot of fun, but the next day I was too sore. So I found this Talking Heads, and what John and Bob both said is they brought art to music. There's this there was this thing I think in the 90s it got a lot of flack, performance art, and this was performance art with talent. This was performance art you could dance to. And I've seen them live, and I watched that other movie. I like the part about the woman who was so rich that she could just stay in bed. That sounds like a wonderful life to me. And I also what is it, Abby?
American Utopia.
American Utopia is on HBO, and it takes the same sort of directing that they had in this movie, Stop Making Sense, and takes it to a whole nother level. They
It's on
break down. It's on Broadway. They break down, they deconstruct the band, and the drum set is run by like 3 different people because each musician had one piece of the drum set, for example. I recommend watching that to anybody who's interested in this form of minimalist concert art. And I know that the concert movies before that, there were usually hair bands, and there was some controversy and some gossip, and you know, they had to have the interviews. There was that movie that made a parody of those sort of concert movies where the guy goes, "This one goes to 11." Remember?
This is Spinal Tap.
What was the name of that movie?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's so this was really nice. It was like watching art, and Abby was watching the movie and getting enlightened, I'd like to think. And I was singing along, which drove her crazy. I could sing them to you now. Yeah, the Talking Heads. That's enough out of me. Thanks.
Oh, thank you, David. That's great. That's
Thanks,
wonderful.
David.
Thank you.
Okay, so got Bill B, then me, then D.
Nice introduction to this film, Andy, and as usual, great comments by everybody. I think that take you had on the creation story, I think really does resonate. I got out of there was a real arc to where the film started and where it ended up. And it really did. It not only started out as a solo artist and then slowly built it up until he got to a big crescendo with burning down the house, but it then was all about sort of the angst and psychobabble that I think Byrne was almost playing a character there of somebody was having to struggle with all kinds of inner demons. And then by the time you get to Take Me to the River and the final number, Cross-Eyed and
Mhm.
forget the rest of it, but it's
Painless.
almost like he has reached a catharsis with Down by the River, and even his approach to playing and performing changed on the last number, where he kind of relaxed into it, and it's like, I found my home. I'm back. I've arrived. And I agree too with there's been a lot of really good comments tonight, a lot of which I agree with. The Jonathan Demme himself went out of his way to say this is not a concert film. This is a performance film, and he built it that way, and so he even shot it in a manner where you weren't even really aware of the audience till the very end. I think Byrne too is a really unique figure in music. I, like you, Andy, I'm a fan of the Heads. I've never been a huge fan, but I've always been very impressed with Byrne as an artist, and particularly what a unique artist he is. And in terms of the energy he brings to performances, I put him on a level of some of these other guys that are like the hardest working men in show business: James Brown, Bruce Springsteen, Mick Jagger, Roger Daltrey. He's always moving, and he's always telling a story physically as well as musically. Now, I think there's a lot of discussion and argument about exactly what it is that you call the Talking Heads music, because they are genre bending to the nth degree. I would characterize them as new wave, but I think you could make an argument that they're post-punk. They're not really punk. Part of the reason I would go that way is that his melodies tend to be very minimalist, but his rhythms are extremely complex and very not punk. Yeah, and he borrows very heavily from Afro-Cuban and calypso rhythms, and he does an awful lot of layering in terms of where he's trying to go with it. So again, as has been pointed out already, he brings performance art to the table, which I think particularly when he brought it on was a really interesting move, and was kind of in its own way an anti-statement to what was going on in MTV, because it was performance art as opposed to lots of quick cuts and lots of cinematic tricks. It's like it's all about staging and decor and the lighting on the stage at the time. I was reading somewhere that the idea of the big suit, apparently he went to Japan and immersed himself in the arts there, and came away after watching No Theater, NOH, and Kabuki, and how the costumes are larger than life and carry their own kind of hidden message. So that was apparently where he got the idea to do that. But it's interesting how that's been interpreted. Pauline Kael talked about how that was sort of how Byrne is trapped in this otherworldly, bigger than life character, and then 2/3 of the way through he breaks out of it and becomes more and more himself. And then we go through the catharsis of Down by the River, Take Me to the River, I'm sorry. And so it's a really interesting experience. I think of its type, I would have to agree that you could make an argument that it's the greatest concert film, quote unquote, though I would put at the same level in another almost different genre, something like The Last Waltz or Monterey Pop, which were brilliant in their way and what they were trying to depict. But this was really a unique vision, and it was a unique artist. So yeah, a lot of interesting things going on there. So that's my take.
All right, thanks, Bill.
All right,
Great
thanks,
comments.
Bill.
Great stuff.
Okay.
I also put into the chat a couple of minutes ago, we were talking about some of the writing of David Byrne, and he wrote a book called How Music Works that I highly recommend. I put that in the chat just a couple of minutes ago, so you could pull that out. And I think he's written other things too that I have not read, but that one is a really, really good one. Okay, all right, we got some more people lined up. That's great.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in here, just to say that, this is one of a few concert films that I own on VHS. It's this one and Bring On the Night, which I watched over and over again. They're two very different types of concert films, but both spoke to me and my musical exploration. But I love the Talking Heads. And I, just for that performance art, just for the, because they were very, very prominent on MTV, a lot of videos, a lot of great music, a lot of, once you start listening to it, you hear the layers and you can piece some of the things out. I just want to talk about the creation theory. I remember thinking, watching this with, some friends and maybe being slightly intoxicated, thinking, what is he on? But also, is he an alien? Like, it almost was a very weird sort of progression about how, he was this weird guy in this place with this drum machine and speaking French and trying to figure out like what's going on. And then you get to, gosh, I can't think of this. I have to look up the song, but you get to the part where, this is a place where they're like at home and he feels part of the family. And then at the end, so I kind of see that creation thing, but we also talked about how it was like an alien learning how to become part of our culture. And so I just wanted to throw there. I also wanted to throw in the fact that I was very happy when my kids wanted to play Rock Band and now know all of the words to Psycho Killer, because that was one of their favorite songs to sing. In fact, making my daughter think, oh, you know what? I think I want to learn French. A weird connection, but just letting that know that there's, just like Abby, there's another generation of kids that are really into the Talking Heads. But
That's
that was
great.
all my moments.
No, I love that. I love the alien thing. And you know what, even in Psycho Killer, where he starts doing the stumbling around thing, he's not comfortable in his own body. You see some of that there too. So I like that.
Do.
Yeah.
Or and the other part, like when he put on the suit, that was him trying to like fit into the working society, and you may ask yourself, how did I get here? So you get a lot of that going on. Okay. My segue is over. Back to Dee, and then Jeff, and then Kathy. Nope.
So I feel that maybe I was a lot slow on the uptake about David Byrne, in that it was only just a year or two ago, watching the more recent film, American Utopia, that I finally understood it. I was like, oh, David Byrne is an artist, not just wants to have videos that are popular on MTV and keep in popular music. So I also really recommend that movie. It was really striking. And then the other thing I just want to mention is I was thinking back to the mid-'80s and what all the videos and who the popular artists were. And I was just thinking how dumbfounded I would have been if someone had come back from the future to the mid-'80s and told me that David Byrne and Cyndi Lauper were both going to have shows on Broadway. And so I just thought I'd share that. It just seems so surprising.
Yeah, that's a head scratcher, right?
But seems about right. Music matures, and so so did they.
Yeah.
Okay, Jeff, then Kathy.
Great discussion so far, guys. Really enjoying this one. I was born in 1960. So when the punk new wave thing started, I would have been about 16, 17. So that was right in the formative time of my really starting to get into music. And honestly, the punk and new wave don't have a big footprint for me. The two exceptions for that were, one was the Clash, and that was essentially just the one album, the London Calling album. The other one was the Talking Heads, and I dug on these guys pretty good. Like, I have all the vinyl, like all of the albums. So I've always been a huge fan of this movie, but I hadn't seen it since I think 2007 was the last time I saw it. So it was neat to come back and look at it again. And I thought when I saw it then that it was the best concert movie I'd ever seen. I probably like it more now. Because I love the way that they kind of it flies in the face of the excesses of rock and roll and the way rock was always filmed, with the crazy guitar and the cutting and the audience shots and all that amped up feel. And this is so minimalist, and it's just you and the band. And I love the fact that the very first thing we see in it is David Byrne's feet. It's just so unassuming, and just, hey, hi, I got a tape I want to play. And that's how we kick into it. It's so well done that way. And it's just you and the music, and that's the way it should be. A couple of other things. I just wanted to point out the two highlights I have in it. For me, it's pretty much wall-to-wall highlights. But for me, they're Burning Down the House is the first one. Which I think was an old line from a Parliament Funkadelic song. I think that's where that comes from.
Mhm.
And the other one is Life During Wartime. This ain't no party, this ain't no disco. That's always been a favorite of mine. I'd also like to mention, I remember the first time I went through this, I kind of wasn't a big fan of the Tom Tom Club and their section in it. This time I actually kind of get into it. I was, holy crap, I'm tapping my feet to this. So maybe it wasn't so bad after all. So yeah, I just always loved this movie, and I'm glad we got the chance to do it.
Thanks, Jeff. That's great.
Thanks. Yeah. Kathy's next. And I thought I saw another hand, but maybe not.
Hi, I want to thank you for having us watch it. I really enjoyed it. I had been somewhat familiar with the music, but I was super busy around 1984. So when I saw this film, I was overjoyed. It just seems to be so perfectly done. And I think when I look back, I say that it was really so cutting edge that what they were using for instruments, and they were really developing like other artists were not. And the band, it seemed like everyone in the band was super talented, and they used them all to the, it wasn't just like David Byrne, it was like the whole band. And I just really enjoyed it because it allowed me to enjoy the music and actually look into David Byrne and the Talking Heads and things that I had only heard the songs, and actually one of the songs is one of my favorite songs of all time. I think This Must Be the Place, but really didn't know much of anything about it. So was really glad to have the opportunity to watch it, and I'm going to watch it again.
All right, great. Thank you.
All right. Oh, yes, Bob.
Sorry, there was some discussion about whether this was punk kind of music or a new wave. Vern always had a little bit of trepidation about playing before punk groups, especially if he thought they were going to like him, because the punk crowds would show their extreme appreciation by launching giant globs of spit toward the performers that they liked best. And you notice in the movie, these guys didn't get anywhere close to the front of that stage.
Good point.
Very true, very true.
That was good for everyone. Yeah.
Oh.
All
Okay, we
right.
got no more hands, but I would like, oh, Bill, go ahead.
So I went first and I listened to everybody talk about what they thought about it. And I'd say 90% of what I heard was how much I love the Talking Heads. It wasn't really about, you know, the movie techniques or the other kinds of things we often talk about when we talk about movies. It was really about their love for the Talking Heads. And so, okay, great. There's lots of people like them. I'm not as big a fan as obviously as many of you are, but I still believe, I agree with the point that David Byrne puts on quite a performance, and it certainly is more of an art than lots of musicians do. But I still argue that was the show that they put on, and it was just well filmed. It wasn't like they especially did this just for the movie. This is just their show, and so they made a nice recording of the show.
Okay. And you are certainly entitled to your opinion, and I'm glad you watched the movie. I think, though, from what a lot of people have said, that more went into this than just a typical concert film. I mean, they just could have set the camera there and filmed the concert. But I think Jonathan Demme had something more in mind, as many of us have pointed out. Okay, Darnice, who's next?
I think that was it. Oh, Debbie,
Okay,
go
I
ahead.
see John and Debbie.
Oh, sorry, John. And
Maybe more.
Debbie's before me.
okay.
Well, I guess what I'd like to say is, first of all, yeah, I do like the Talking Heads, but I don't think of them as punk at all. When I think of punk, I think of the Sex Pistols, the Clash, maybe the Ramones. This is nothing like the Sex Pistols or the Clash. I mean, this is post-punk, definitely. And the other thing I wanted to say was this is much more than just filming a concert. I mean, the concert itself was amazing. And the way it builds from that single, very minimalist opening, which I noticed, right down to the credits. The credits themselves are minimalist, and I love them. And you see his feet, and it's great. I mean, and he's very like, I'm going to turn on this tape recorder, okay? But then you get that additional sound from the the electronic whatever it is going on anyway. But I what the movie does is it takes you right in there on the stage in a way that I had never seen in another concert movie, and it's very deliberate. This is not just some guy with an iPhone just filming things. I mean, the choices of where he puts the camera are very deliberate. You actually go in at one point, right? It's like you're crawling in among the equipment. So I just felt very close to the performers while this movie was happening. And to me, it was a very inspiring movie too, because I thought, wow, this is real cutting edge stuff for the time. I mean, like you had pointed out, somebody had pointed out that MTV had started earlier, a few years earlier. And this is like a new kind of movie almost, in a sense, as well as the music being so incredibly diverse. So it's about more than just liking the Talking Heads. It's about filming a concert in a way that's different, that showcases the showmanship in the concert too at the same time. One of the most striking scenes to me was going from that minimalist set where it's nothing in the background but what looks like these really tall shelving, metal shelving things, and then filling it in with the instruments. And then you have this odd bit with the screens and the words coming up at random and then coming up so that they make sense. Pun sort of intended. But I just thought it was way more than just some guy filming a concert. This was somebody making a statement about what music can be, what a concert can be. And it's like an audio-visual experience rather than just music being played. And I was just incredibly inspired by it. That's just the way I felt. So anyway, that's all I have to say, I guess.
Thank you, Debbie.
That's great.
Okay,
Okay.
John and Jeff.
Well, I think having Bill as a devil's advocate provokes thoughts in me that I would not have had otherwise. But I do want to say that I think the camera plays a very important role in this movie. And it does so by focusing on certain things at certain times in certain ways. I mean, there's the wide shot that's used in burning down the house, which is very effective, I think, in terms of conveying the gravity of the song. But a lot of the camera work is spent on stage, in among the performers, and pays a lot of attention to the side people. I don't know what they call the backup singers. There's a name for them. There was actually a movie made about them. I didn't see it, but the two women who are backing them up vocally, he gets right in the middle with them. The camera does. There's also the guy who plays the bongos and so forth. He even sticks out his tongue at one point as he's passing by the camera. And the camera really does weave its way in and out at times among the performances. There's a lot of attention paid to Byrne for sure. I mean, he's the main act there. But even then, the intimacy of the camera, which this is what struck me while I was watching the movie. The camera gets very close to him at times, very intimate, and he is as cool as ice. It's not like he even acknowledges that the camera's there. He's just doing his thing. And there's a moment when he's finished performing and the audience is going, you can hear them going wild. And it's like, okay, I just finished adding up the numbers on the column. Now it's time to do the next check sheet. He's as cool as ice. He has no affect when it comes to the audience. And the camera captures that. The camera captures him in a way that an audience member, I mean, sitting in the seats would never have been able to see. So I think that the camera does a lot of work to bring the viewer much more information, shall we say. The other thing I'll just add, because I don't want to take up any more time, is that you need to consider the effect of the lighting. The lighting tells a very important story throughout that film. And the way it's handled is very deliberate. It's not just, spotlights. It's not like the typical concert where there's lights shining and trying to, the lighting is trying to evoke emotional effects. There's one scene where the lighting on Byrne is underneath and his face looks all contorted, almost demonic. And that's all created by the lighting director. That's not something that, the camera just stumbled upon. That was created in that effect. So there's a lot of that stuff going on that I think if you were to see it again, you might have a better appreciation for the cinematic quality. I mean, Demi, I think he's not in my pantheon, I have to admit, but I do think he's a very, very good director, and I think he showed it here.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
Okay, so we got Jeff, then David.
I just wanted to jump back in here and just on top of what John just was talking about as well with Byrne. I get a kick out of watching the way he uses his body and the way he uses his face, because he's like two people or two beings stuck together. Like from here up, he's got the joyless android thing going, and that's very evident even in Psycho Killer. He's got but when you watch him from the neck down, like, yeah, this guy's having a ball out there, and I just think he is just such an interesting screen presence. For that reason. When I talked about my first go around, I was mentioning about the new wave punk era. And I know the Heads were always kind of lumped into the new wave stuff with people like Devo and people like that. But it struck me this time, like they're a funk band is really what they are. And like, man, this was funky stuff going on up there. So yeah, I know that's what they were considered part of, but when you hear them now, they're way more than a new wave band. To me, they're a kind of a proto funk band.
Okay,
you,
yeah, I like that.
All right, David.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on what folks were saying about his affect on stage. He is on the autistic spectrum. And I saw interviews with him where he said he was terrified to go on stage, but I'm not sure if that had anything to do with why his face was so neutral. But he may have trouble expressing himself because of that. But it's also part of the art. It gave the impression to me and the courage that he had to express his art, even though he had stage fright, or maybe even deeper than that. So that's wonderful. He did a lot of other work with artists like Brian Eno and Robert Fripp. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They did I think it was Fripp and Byrne did an album called The Catherine Wheel, which similar to a lot of Eno's stuff is this sort of, oh, I can't remember the name of the music. It's a lot of Eno was a fascinating artist as well. If you haven't heard him, I suggest listening to him. I know that Debbie likes him, so that's good. Anyway, he's so versatile. I mean, despite the fact that he has this problem with performing live, he can go into a studio and produce art. And I know I'm not going to give Bill too much grief. I made a snarky comment about, yeah, sure, the Mona Lisa was just Da Vinci's painting, but I think this was the same thing. You see the art for what it is, and not everybody likes the art. And the way that it was presented was part of the art itself. Like I said, performance art. Abby, did you want to say anything?
She's just lurking in the background.
Well, I just wanted to add to the point about like him being neurodivergent. Watching the film last night and just like the American Utopia film that we saw like over the summer was just his general attitude and how like watching him, I was like, people thought he was cool, you know, like he was popular. But I thought that it spoke a lot where someone who has like some more social anxiety can be like a rock star kind of. So I thought that was really cool to see.
Yeah, I thought that I like what she said, of course.
She's a smart young lady.
Thanks. I wanted to ask you, I think David, you said you saw him live, right?
Yes, yes.
How was that for this album? Was that for a different album? How was
No, it
that?
was for a different album. I can't even remember what it was. It's at the DNR Constitution Hall in Washington, D.C. And so it was a small venue. It was very, very intimate.
Mm-hmm.
I also saw King Crimson there years ago as well. So I'm always making these recommendations if you want to go to a good concert, if they're having them again. I'm sure I have the T-shirt and probably used it to wax my car years ago. Not really. It wouldn't fit me now anyway.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, David. Okay, Bill B. and Bob.
Yeah, I just had a couple more points because again, very stimulating conversation. So the more we hear of everybody, the more you think about. I did read a part of an interview with Byrne where he admitted he was borderline Asperger's, which I think sort of explains a lot on that level. Also, I wanted to echo, Jeff made a really good observation there about how much funk influences Byrne's music. And also the fact that he's got two of those sidemen, one Bernie Worrell, who was one of the founding members of Parliament Funkadelic, which is like, the grandfathers of funk, right? And also Alex Weir, who was with the Brothers Johnson. Yeah. And yeah, the funk element in his music is almost always there somewhere, and sometimes it's absolutely predominant. There was another quick thing about what was different about that movie is I was reading, apparently that was the first time in a full film that digital audio, it was completely digital. That was the first time any movie had been made completely digital audio. So I just thought that was a really interesting thing to come across. I know that Andy's going to get to it when we get to recommendations, but Andy, like you, I have read Burns' book, How Music Works. And I definitely would recommend it for anybody either that's been in a band, wants to be in a band, or want to have anything to do with the music business, because it's a really interesting book. It's sort of autobiographical, but it's more nonlinear. It gets into, each of the chapters can almost stand alone on their own merits, because he talks at length about the music business, about setting up a recording studio, recording techniques, putting a band together, getting into venues and this sort of thing, the financial part of money in music. And it's a really interesting book.
Yeah. Thank you, Bill.
Sorry, I'm having some technical
That's
difficulties. So
okay.
you might hear me
That's
groan a
okay.
little bit.
Oh, go ahead,
Bill,
Darnie.
Bob was next.
Once again, we've gone an hour and no one has mentioned the funniest line in the movie. All right. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, definitely.
That was a stroke of genius.
It was great. It was really great. I may have to sign off here for a minute.
Okay,
I'll
we'll
be right
get you
back.
back in. I'll get you
All right.
back in. So while Darnice is stepping out for a moment, I wanted to encourage anybody that really enjoys the movie and has not looked at this to check out the Blu-ray or the DVD. There's a press conference with the Talking Heads that happened in 1999 for the 15th anniversary of the film, where they got together. Now, this is not on the DVD or the Blu-ray, but they performed together. As far as I know, 1999 is the last time they performed together as the Talking Heads. But the press conference is very interesting. All the band members get to talk. But the best thing about the film is the commentary track, where you have all of the members of the band and Jonathan Demme talking about not only what went behind the scenes, what decisions they made with camera angles and that type of thing, but so much more. I mean, it's like having a behind the scenes tour, backstage pass of what was going on. So highly encourage that. Okay, let me let Darnice in. And so let's get into, unless anybody else has any comments, we'll get into some recommendations. All right, many of which we've already had. There's been some really good recommendations, and a couple of you stole my thunder on those. That's okay. Somebody brought up This Is Spinal Tap, which is absolutely hilarious film, a mockumentary, rockumentary that came out the same year as Stop Making Sense. Another person mentioned The Last Waltz from 1976. That chronicles the final concert by the Canadian-American group The Band, featuring people such as Eric Clapton, Muddy Waters, Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, Van Morrison, Ringo Starr, and Bob Dylan. And also, speaking of Bob Dylan, one of my recommendations is Rolling Thunder Review, a Bob Dylan story from 2019. This is a loose documentary about Dylan's troubled 1975 Rolling Thunder Review tour, a film that also reflects the troubled 1970s in America. And now all of those, none of those are on Canopy, but all of those are on DVD from the library system. But here is one that's not, as far as I know, is not streaming anywhere, but it's another film from Jonathan Demme that many people have never heard of. And I think this is the American movie that really defines America. Again, you may have never heard of it, but it's called Melvin and Howard from 1980. And I'm going to put a link in the notes about that. It is the story of a person named Melvin Dumar, who apparently this is a true story. He gave a ride to this old guy that was walking across the desert, picks him up, takes him where he needs to go, and then later finds out that he's just given a ride to Howard Hughes. And when he died, Howard Hughes left this guy a fortune, and what he does with it, it's amazing. To me, again, this is the great American movie. All right, those are my recommendations. Let's hear yours.
Okay, Jeff.
Yeah, I'll second Harold and Melvin. Andy, great movie. Jason Robards, I think, and Mary Steenburgen's in that as well. I'm going to mention another Jonathan Demme movie, and which is one that is a huge favorite of mine, and that's Something Wild with Jeff Daniels, Melody Griffith, and Ray Liotta in his first role, and he is just absolutely electric in that movie. Great movie. Changes tone 180 degrees halfway through, but it absolutely pulls it off. And David Byrne sings the opening theme, the open credit theme.
Awesome. Cool. Okay. We've got Susan and then John. Go ahead. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I just
Okay. Sorry.
slow on the mouse. Speaking of Jonathan Demme, one of my favorites is a little sort of almost overlooked film called Rachel Getting Married that I've seen a couple of times and I really enjoyed it. It's about a wedding and an outsider, and it's really a nice little movie.
Awesome. Okay, John.
For anyone who had difficulty grasping the movie, trying to make sense out of it, I recommend you take a look at Mel Brooks's 1963 3.5-minute film called The Critic. If you haven't seen it, it's very, very amusing. At least I think it is. And if you don't think it's that amusing, it's only 3.5 minutes, so you haven't wasted a lot of time. I'm not ordinarily a Mel Brooks fan, but I do think this is really, really funny. It's 60 years old. The other movie I would recommend along the concert film line, because this group is from Iceland, it's called Sigur Rós, Sigurros. And like the Talking Heads, they try to join art and music together. And I think I don't really listen to rock music, but I listen to them. I think they do a really great job. They made a movie in the early 2000s that they cut in 2018. And you can see it online. You don't have to go and get a DVD or anything. It's called Heim, H-E-I-N, which means home in Icelandic. And I think one of the things that's interesting is, by contrast, whereas I think the Talking Heads is really about estrangement and alienation and distance, Heim is very much rooted in an affection for the homeland. There was some beautiful shots of Iceland and so forth. It's a movie that you can just stream online whenever you want, and it's also in black and white for the most part. I think all of it is. So that would be my two recommendations.
All right. Thanks, John.
I'm going to jump in with some recommendations too, and I see Martha has some. So I mentioned Bring On the Night. That's Sting's solo performance, and it talked a lot about how he wanted to change the way his fan base viewed Black performers, that they didn't really embrace them and being part of that, and introducing jazz and funk. And there was a lot of different musical elements that he brought into that album and into that concert. So I thought that was interesting. And two that I just found out about on Canopy. One is, and these are very much more documentaries than concert films, but one is Jimmy and Sly, The Skin I'm In. I watched that a while ago, and it was really fascinating just to hear Jimi Hendrix and Sly Stone from Sly and the Family Stone, and a lot of what they did for music in their genres, and what they did even as activists. And then the other one is Jazz on a Summer's Day, which is a beautiful, beautiful concert. There was I believe it was Monterey Jazz Festival that, gosh, I'm blanking on the names, but you know, some of the powerhouses of jazz during the day, Louis Armstrong and his genre. So those, I'll throw those two in. And I don't know, we didn't really talk about this too much, but I'd mentioned it to Andy before. I was exhausted after watching this film because the energy level of those background singers and even just the band itself. I mean, it was obviously they were dripping with sweat and everybody had the sweat stands and everything, but just the energy level of that concert was amazing to me. And I really enjoyed that part of it, because when you see a lot of concert movies, you might not see that, like you'll see it a little bit, but they really like amped it up and you got to see a lot of it on camera, which was great too. All right, anyone else? Oh, Martha, sorry.
Oh, thank you. So it's very different than the kinds that we normally discuss here, but I still want to recommend one that you can actually, those who are local can come see at the Bush Annapolis Library next Saturday, not tomorrow, at 2:00. And it's called Military Wives. And it's from 2019. So it came out, I'm not sure anyone's ever actually gotten to see it in a theater because it streamed with the Annapolis Film Festival virtually here. And I think it's on Canopy. So if you're not local, I think you can see it. It's part of our Sticks with Flicks monthly program. So if you're a crafter, you can come bring your knitting too. But it stars Kristen Scott Thomas and Sharon, a British lady, I forget. And they play the senior officer's wife and the senior enlisted officer's wife charged with bringing some cohesion to the spouses left at home while the other half of the couples are off fighting in Afghanistan. And there's some moments of humor. It's billed as a feel-good movie, but there's some depth to it too, and beautiful scenery as well. So I just want to... Oh yes, and beautiful music too. Yeah, that's part of how the bonding experience, the support comes about. So 2:00 next Saturday, Military Wives. Hope you'll think about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. I want to put in a quick plug for the Bush Annapolis Library. If you've never been to a movie there, it's a really great experience. They do a wonderful job. And there's a lot of movies I think coming up too, Martha, right? That are coming up, and I think Ann Glenn's going to do some more films there. So that's a great place to see a movie locally.
Yeah, next month, every Monday evening, it's all films by women directors.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, that's going to be a great series.
Yeah.
Very cool, very cool. Andy, I can't remember, did we do Charade as part of our? Okay.
Yes.
So Jonathan Demme also directed a remake of that. It wasn't quite on par. It was The Truth About Charlie with Thandie Newton playing the female lead, it was okay, but it was very interesting because we talked about his eye and the lights and the shadows, and there's a lot of emotion going on in that movie that I think he brings out a little bit more than the comedy version that we watched.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, Darnice. I'm going to put Jonathan Demme's, actually this is Wikipedia page, but his filmography is on that page, and it's very interesting. He's done so many different things. I mean, everybody knows about Silence of the Lambs is the one they know the most, and also a lot of people know that he did Philadelphia and the Manchurian Candidate remake, but his whole filmography is I wouldn't say it's great all the way through, but it's interesting all the way through.
Eclectic.
Eclectic is a good term. Yes. All right. Do we have any more recommendations? Okay, Debbie.
I felt like I couldn't pass up recommending Almost Famous. If you're into rock music. I love that movie because I always identify so much with the young man. He's right about the age I would have been at that time. So it's something I feel very deeply about. There's also one called How to Build a Girl, and I actually read the book and saw part of the movie, and I thought, wow, I want to see all of this movie someday because the book was so good. it was like Almost Famous, except with a girl in Britain. So that was very interesting. Also, I have to mention, because I love these movies so much, A Hard Day's Night and Help.
Yes.
Two movies about a very famous band that you've probably heard of. This little band called the Beatles. And I'll just also mention in passing, Rock and Roll High School and the Blues Brothers. So I like comedy. What can I say? And as far as concerts, there's also Let It Be when it comes to the Beatles. They did that concert on top of a building, which was unusual. It was the Beatles on top of a building in this city doing a concert. Like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, and then of course you have these weird other movies that I can't remember the names of, or, you know, things like Magical Mystery Tour, which are a little off the wall, to say the least. But if you're into that, that's fun to explore too.
All good ones.
There you go.
Thank you. All right. Do we have any others? Okay. All right. So, wow. So, yeah, I didn't know we would be able to go for over an hour on Stop Making Sense, but I'm so glad we did. And I'm so glad you watched the film and joined us tonight for the discussion. Thank you so much for being here. And I hope everybody's doing well, and I hope everybody stays safe. Hope you'll join us next time for Hit the Road. And if you're at the library at Severna Park, stop on by. If you're at Maryland City, stop by and say hello to Darnice. And if you're not anywhere local, I'll see you next time. Thanks again, everybody. Take care. Dave, good to see you and Abby. Nice to have you.
Oh, thanks. She turned me on to this. I'll come back.
Good.
Awesome. Great. Thank you.
It's good to hear. Thanks. Good night.